Well, good evening and welcome to writing the novel. I've enjoyed giving this class over the years, and I see a couple of students from my Palos Verdes class are here as well, which is great. I'm I'm going to I'm going to send everybody 3 documents tomorrow: the sample outline, which I'll go over, the character biography checklist suggestions, which I'll go over. And again, I'll go over information about writer's block, and I will send you handouts from those chapters tomorrow. Here's a little bit about me for the people who don't know. We'll just spend about 30 seconds on that. And here are a few of my books. Hopefully you'll have read one or more of them. If you haven't, there's always time. I won't spend a whole lot of time about my backstory, but I'll tell you a little bit about it. When I rolled into town many, many years ago, I didn't come here to be a writer. I came here to be a rock and roll star. That didn't really work out exactly as I planned. After 3 weeks in Los Angeles, I landed a job working for an educational TV show that was going to be produced in Mexico. The show had a pedigreed producer, and I used to watch his show with my parents when I was growing up in Ohio, so he had to be legit. And there were 2 writers from the Sonny and Cher show, so it had to be legit. So I was figuring what was so difficult about making it in Los Angeles. I'd only been there 3 weeks and things were really moving. Perhaps you know the end of this story. It's a common one. The show didn't happen, which was kind of tough on me because I'd sold my car. Let's face it, who needed a car in Mexico City? So instead of living large south of the border, I was working the graveyard shift at the Old World restaurant on the Sunset Strip, going to and fro in a borrowed friend's car, in a borrowed car from a friend of mine, catering to real rock and roll stars who would come in after working in the studio till all hours of the night. So life got pretty hard pretty quick. But I did figure out a way to make money writing in Los Angeles. And one of the things I was doing is I was ghostwriting for doctors. And I did that for a couple of years. And it actually, one night I was sitting around with one of these doctors who I was writing for, and he said, why don't we write a novel together? And Robert Ludlum was very big at the time, and he and I were into some metaphysics, so we kind of thought about why don't we write a kind of a metaphysical Robert Ludlum novel, and it was called The Atlantean Document. So he said, I'll give you $200 a chapter. And I was broke at the time, so I figured if I wrote 1,000 chapters, I would be in really good shape. We settled for 25 chapters, which was less than I was hoping for, but it was something, and it was a start. And we really had I knew more than he did about the publishing business, and I knew that we really didn't have much of a chance of ever selling the novel. But in fact, we did. Actually, when I took the manuscript to a writer friend of his in the Valley, we only knew one other professional writer, and after 2 weeks, he left the manuscript on his porch with a note indicating that I should borrow a couple of books from the library, because obviously I couldn't afford them. He assumed that I had to borrow a couple of books from the library on how to write a novel. And so it was really a deflating experience. But 2 weeks later, we sold the book for $5,000, and then I got an agent, and it changed my life completely. So when you want to get started writing, you got to figure out why. A few questions are in order. Number one is, why do you want to write? It's a good idea to know why you want to do anything. especially if you're planning to commit serious amount of time to it. And if your main motivation for writing novels is to make money, don't waste your time with this course. Um, and then you want to figure out where you want to write. This is kind of funny because I had a really good friend of mine who took this course from me, and he had just built a cottage in his backyard, and it was completely empty. And he said, I started reading your course and I got stuck. And so I said, where did you get stuck? He said, well, I couldn't figure out a place to write. I said, Don, you have an empty cottage in your backyard. There's no one there. And it's brand new. And he said, oh, yeah, you're right. I guess the point of that story is that if you can come up with a lot of reasons not to write. So if you really want to write, you will be able to find a place to write and find time to write. And in terms of committing time, people often tell me that they don't have any time to write. And I always find this amusing. On the one hand, people tell me that writing is their passion, yet they find more time to watch television than to live their passion. And in terms of a specific amount of time, I find that even if it's 15 minutes a day, if you actually commit 15 minutes a day and you actually do 15 minutes 5 days a week, you actually will have a lot of production after a couple of months. It's really important to know your audience. Every writer has a target audience, whether he realizes it or not. If you're writing a romance novel, your audience is readers of romance novels. If you're writing a mystery novel, you should be familiar with the type of reader who reads mysteries. After you've identified your target audience, there are things you should do to help your book appeal to that specific audience. For example, if you're writing a mystery for people who like reading about crime solved by elderly women and their cats, you're probably going to play down explicit sex and violence and play up the relationship between your amateur detective and her cat. If you're writing men's adventure novels, as I once did for Warner Books under a pseudonym, you will play up the sex and violence angles and introduce an attractive female character. I was talking to a friend of mine a couple days ago. Under the name Wade Barker, I wrote a men's adventure series for Warner Books. I actually did the Bible, which is the backstory of all the characters, and I did novels 1, 3, 5, and 7. Several years later, they were up to about book 45, and this was supposed to be the last book in the series. And at the end of it, at the end of the book, they acknowledged all the people who had been important in the series. I looked for my name, and it wasn't even there. Write what you know about. You can also attract an audience by highlighting interests, vocations, and hobbies with which you're familiar. For example, one of my students was writing a book about a famous American woman, and a famous American woman played a small but integral part in the story. I suggested that the writer search the internet for all sites that focused on the woman. When her manuscript was done, I advised the writer to contact these sites in order to get quotes and reviews for her book. I told her that if someone at the website liked her book, she could make a deal to sell the book on that site. In this way, the writer gets the book promoted for free and puts her book on a virtual bookstore in front of her target audience. It also gives you an opportunity when you connect with people who have websites to do some social marketing and some blogging and directly to your target audience. Chances are, if you like something, you can project your enthusiasm and interest to your readers, no matter what it is. If it's golf, football, collecting stamps, or even crocheting, there's a way to make your interest come alive through your characters. And you say, who's going to be interested in crocheting? If you're interested in it, you can make other people interested in it too. Exactly what makes crocheting interesting to you? What makes it interesting to millions of people who crochet? Something captured their attention, and remember what it is and go with that. If you're interested in what you're writing about, chances are the reader will be too. And the converse of that is true too. If you're just putting in characters and ideas that you think are popular and you're really not interested in them, usually the reader can tell. And incorporating your passions into your novel makes the book more fun to write and more fun to read. I'll take a second here. You might want to make a note about this. This is a fun exercise. You choose something that you're interested in that most people don't know about. For example, maybe you like working with an obscure puzzle. I love Sudokus. I do the hard Sudokus every day just to relax and take my mind off of things. I've been doing them for 5 or 6 years. Maybe you're crazy about a little town most people have never heard of. Maybe you're a musician, an actor, or writer who isn't famous but deserves attention. It could be a subject you read about, for example, a particular aspect of the Civil War that you find fascinating. And then make a list of the top 5 reasons you like this thing, place, person, or subject, and why you think others would too, if they knew what else. Some writers use outlines, some don't. I know Ed McBain, he wrote the famous 87th Precinct series. He used to like to go in with the body on the floor with the cops. He didn't want to know who did it. He didn't want to know anything besides what the reader knew at that time. And to him, that was a way for him to get interested every morning when he went to work. For me, the only time I ever wrote a book without an outline is actually just after I talked to Ed McBain. I decided to give it a try. And it was one of my books called Hollywood Heroes. It was an Ace Carpenter book. And it was very tough going, very, very tough going. So it's just a personal thing. A lot of writers get lost without an outline. I personally use an outline. Another interesting phenomenon takes place when you start putting your scenes into some kind of an outline. It becomes clear that there are scenes missing that link other scenes together. Therefore, one of the most common experiences students have when doing the outline exercise at the end of this chapter in the book is that the outline becomes sort of a machine that helps you generate lots of other scenes. For example, if you have a scene in which your protagonist is having a great time on vacation with his new girlfriend, but you haven't introduced her yet, you realize that several scenes leading up to the vacation are missing. You need a couple of scenes to flesh out the girlfriend so that the reader will understand who she is and so on. Before doing this exercise, one student was stuck because she had identified only about 3 or 4 scenes for her entire novel. After doing the outline exercise, which I will send to you, email to everyone tomorrow morning, after doing this particular exercise, she came back the next week with more than 30 scenes. She explained to the class that when she started placing one scene here and another there, she realized there were scenes needed to link them together. And when those scenes were placed in the outline, more missing link scenes became obvious. And don't worry if your outline starts out bare-boned and a little vague. Think of it as kind of a mandala, a focusing tool for your literary meditation. Your book has a beginning, middle, and an end. Your outline has a beginning, middle, and end. Now, when you think about your story, you know every scene fits somewhere in that outline. And then when you have an idea for the scenes, they go somewhere in that outline. If they don't, then they don't belong in your book, no matter how brilliant they are. And that happens sometimes. I've written scenes where I really, really fall in love with a scene. It's my favorite scene in the whole book, but when I try to put it in the outline somewhere, it doesn't go. And I realize no matter how much I love that scene, it actually does not go in the book. But focusing your story with the aid of an outline helps you concentrate on the logical flow and pacing of your story. So what's a plot? It could be a piece of ground where a person is buried. Many a writer has found himself in a position where his story died and he didn't have a plot to bury it in. In fact, that's often the reason it died. The definition we're looking for is found in the American Heritage Dictionary. Plot, a series of events consisting of an outline of the action of a narrative or drama. Plot is what the story is about. For example, boy meets girl, boy loses girl, boy gets girl. Another example, a young man is a great runner. He gets in an accident, loses a leg, and then runs a 10K in order to call attention to his ability rather than disability. It has been said that there are only about a dozen plots and that all other plots are simply variations of the originals. That may be true, but the handling of those plots is what separates good writers from bad ones. For example, the plot of The One-Legged Runner could be handled in such a way as to manipulate the reader at every turn with one cliche after another, and in the process insult the integrity of the disabled. On the other hand, the plot could be handled in such a way as to avoid the obvious tear-jerking scenes, or most of them anyway, and treat the subject matter and the hero with dignity and in a way that is not only entertaining, but unique enough to get the reader's attention. Conflict. Conflict can manifest in many forms. It can be a person who stands in the way of the protagonist achieving his or her goals, an abusive parent, a mean colleague, a sabotaging spouse, a terrorist, a hired gun, a romantic rival, an obsessive bureaucrat. The list is endless. It's as endless as your imagination. And conflict can also manifest as other things like Mother Nature, an unbearable cold when your protagonist's plane crashes in Alaska, unbearable heat when your character is dropped off to die in the middle of the desert. Conflict can also manifest in the form of other things as well. For many, the depression was the biggest obstacle they ever had to overcome. Your story's conflict can be determined by identifying the protagonist's main goal. Conflict occurs when something or someone stands in the way of your protagonist accomplishing his goals. Without conflict, your story would not be interesting and would probably be very short. For example, if the goal of the protagonist is to marry his great love, if he does so in the first chapter, there's no conflict. His goal is getting married, and he does so. End of story. It's not much of a novel. It's more like a wedding video. Okay, editing. It's important to get an honest professional opinion from a real editor. One of the most incredible experiences of my life was when I was getting ready to write my first novel. I had a friend who worked for the Hollywood Reporter, and he said he would be honest, and he was. I gave him 10 pages, and when he returned them, I was mortified. There was so many red marks on the page, on my pages, it looked as though someone had slit his wrist and bled all over them. It was awful. But that wasn't the worst part. By the third page, the editor started writing sarcastic comments in the margins, apparently utterly stupefied by the notion that I was actually trying to sell my work. The deeper he got into my 10 pages, the more he felt it necessary to share his apprehensions and opinions regarding my literary aspirations. As horrible as this experience was, it was also the single most important and instructive event in my writing career, at least from the point of view of grammar. As I looked at all the red scars on my precious pages, I realized that many of the cuts looked the same. I was making many of the same mistakes over and over on each page. When I corrected the 3 errors that occurred the most, more than 50% of the red ink went away. And writing is different from editing, and I know excellent editors who can't write and excellent writers who are very poor editors. I divide the process of editing into 2 separate categories, although they can be done at the same time: overview editing and line editing. The first type of editing looks at the work from a larger perspective. It's the big picture. Does the story work? Is it paced correctly? Does it flow naturally, or does it seem forced? Is the story missing any key elements? Are there sections of the book that drag or cause the reader to lose interest? This basic edit is important, and it's not necessarily the time to get it down to the specifics of commas and semicolons, because really you're not even sure that work is ever going to be there when the work is completed. Once the basic structure is sound, and it's time to do the line edit. This is the time to catch grammar mistakes and polish your work. If you're an unpublished writer and plan to submit your work to a publisher, you might consider hiring an editor to look at your manuscript before you submit it. You probably have only one shot per manuscript with any editor, and no one knows how long it took you to write your book or how many people edited the manuscript before you submitted it. You get all the credit and all the blame once it's in an editor's hands. And by the way, all of my books, even the ones that I publish, I self-publish, I end up hiring an editor for each one. You need a new set of eyes on your work, big picture and small picture. Also, I look at writing and editing as completely two different flows. When I write, I just kind of flow down the river and let myself go and I'll write down what I see. I just let it all go and just write down what I see and just take the adventure myself. When I'm editing, that's totally different. It's more analytical. It can be creative too, and I know a lot of editors who are very creative in their own way, and some editors are much better than others. That's definitely true. But it's a different flow for me, and I think it's a different flow for most people. And I think that if you try to combine the two, sometimes you end up inhibiting the first one. We all know people who, when you ask them what time it is, they ask you, they tell you how to build a watch. Too many words, too much description can come between the reader and the story. It was once said that Hemingway that he never sent a reader running for a dictionary. Unless you're writing a thesaurus or exclusively for English professors, there's no need to use words others don't understand. Character development. To me, this is really the most important chapter in the course, the most important module in the course, and for me, it's the most important thing that I do when I write a novel. It's important for several reasons. First, if you don't know your characters, your readers certainly won't. And if they don't find a character with whom they can identify or root for, or at least be curious enough to turn the page about, then you're going to lose your reader. Second, if you don't know your characters, they have a tendency to become caricatures. All the bad guys wear black hats and say the obvious and do the obviously bad things, and the good guys do the opposite. In short, none of the characters really seem real. And third, if your characters have no will of their own, they will merely sleepwalk through the various plot points in your outline, and they'll do nothing that will surprise the reader or the writer. This has been really important to me over the years. I always submitted an outline to HarperCollins or whatever publisher I was with in New York, and I never actually followed it. I mean, I followed it to a certain point, but very often you get to a point in the story where your characters take you one way and the outline takes you another, and you have to make a choice. And for me, and I always, if you ever reach a fork in the road and your character leads you one way and your outline leads you another, always follow your character. And for me, that has always worked, and I will never change that. Okay, what is a character biography? I'm going to give you kind of a list of some of my questions, and you don't have to write this down. I'm going to give you all these questions tomorrow. One question I always use is, if I got into the protagonist's car and turned on the radio, what would I hear? Rock music, NPR, conservative talk radio, jazz, a news channel, a religious channel, hip-hop, ESPN, an oldie station, maybe the guy has satellite radio. All these things tell the reader something about your character. Instead of explaining your character to readers, show how he is, show who he is through his actions, behavior, quirks, where he lives, places he goes, and the people he hangs out with. If I went into your character's home, what kinds of books would I see on the shelves? Are they hardcover books or paperbacks? Does your character read them or buy them to display in order to impress people? Are certain books worn from overuse? Which ones? What do the books tell me about your character? Are there a lot of self-help books with barely cracked spines? Are there books on how to quit drinking or smoking? If there are a lot of self-help books that are barely read, then the character may be a person who recognizes his flaws, wants to change, but can't quite commit to making the transformation. If I went to your character's liquor cabinet or place he keeps alcohol, what would I find? Half-full bottles that have been there for years? Do I see hard liquor or candy-flavored liqueur? Are there lots of $50 bottles of scotches or cognac? Is there just one bottle of high-end liquor? Is there one big gallon bottle of cheap vodka? Is there a flask in sight that looks like it's been used lately? Is there a flask tucked in the back of the cabinet that doesn't look as though it's been used in a long time? Is there a large amount of fine wines arranged in some peculiar order known only to your character? Does your character refuse to have liquor in the house? Does your character serve liquor to guests but refuse to drink himself? The answer to each of these questions tells the reader something different about your character. If I looked into your character's refrigerator, would I see a lot of meat? Would I see no meat? Would I see lots of vegetables and fruits? Would I see dairy products or no dairy products? Would I see a bottle of vodka chilling in the freezer? What do the answers to these questions tell the reader about your character? If I looked in your character's medicine cabinet, would I see a lot of prescriptions? Only homeopathic remedies, sleeping pills, Viagra? Does your character speak to his grown children twice per week? How about once a month? Not very often, usually on holidays? Hasn't heard from the kids in a few years? Hasn't called them in a few years? Never talks to the family. Does your character believe in God? What if he went to church every week and has done so for 50 years? What if he considers himself more of a spiritual person and doesn't go to church? Be aware of how the answers to these questions resonate with your readers and how the answers make them feel about your character. For example, describing a character as a Christian will make some people feel differently about your character than saying that he is Muslim or a Jew or spiritually oriented and into meditation. Describing a character as a conservative Republican will make some people feel differently about your character than saying he is apolitical or a liberal Democrat. Readers have a different impression of characters who drive a Lexus as opposed to a character who drives an old Toyota Corolla. All these characteristics are choices you make as a writer. Showing the reader who your character is instead of telling the reader who he is allows the reader to participate in the creative process. Readers often tell me that they're as interested, if not more so, in the B plot of my novels as they are in the A plot. As a writer, I'm often more interested in the B plot, partly because I usually know where the A plot is headed, while I'm unsure how the B plot will be resolved. If you ever find yourself losing interest in your main story, try spicing things up with a subplot that interests you. If it interests you, it'll probably interest your reader. When I was writing Hollywood Heroes, I knew I had a pretty good idea who did it, but my B plot was whether the detective was going to stay together with his girlfriend. And I was going through a breakup with my girlfriend at the time, and I was completely unclear as to whether we were going to end up together. And so it really, I kept I kept thinking a lot about it and bringing my real raw feelings about how I was feeling about this breakup into my writing every day. And I found it very interesting. I had a lot of people comment on that. When I use the term B-plot, it doesn't mean to imply that there are only two plots, an A and a B plot. There are often many subplots in a book. For example, say you're writing about a family working desperately to overcome the death of the father and work their way out of the depression together. Besides a surviving mother, you've got 5 children, 2 boys and 3 girls. The 2 boys go to war just after Pearl Harbor is bombed, and the 3 girls stay home to keep the family together and help their mother. Each of the girls has a love interest, perhaps a couple of other interests. Serving abroad. Maybe the mother is working to save the family farm from foreclosure, and this is the A plot. The mother and daughters work to achieve the main goal, which is to save the farm. Yet the mother and each of the children have subplots that capture the reader's attention and imagination. Will one of the sons be killed while fighting abroad? Perhaps one of the daughter's boyfriends is wounded in battle, and his fate is unknown. A good writer can create compelling subplots with each family member. Even if you're not writing a mystery or a thriller, it's often still a good idea to create some suspense. There are many ways to accomplish this. For example, there's the classic ticking bomb scenario in which your protagonist is unaware that a bomb is about to go off beneath or near him. The reader knows there is a bomb and may even know when it will explode, often counting it down via some computer readout on the bomb. You don't need dynamite or nuclear fission to create suspense. Perhaps 2 characters are getting married. The reader knows the woman is pregnant with another man's baby, but the husband-to-be, your protagonist, doesn't know the woman is pregnant or that the baby is his brother's child, his married brother's child, who is also a priest. You get the idea. The point is, the reader knows information and your protagonist does not. Mystery. Even if your book's not a mystery, you will often find it useful to create mystery in your story. The American Heritage Dictionary defines mystery as anything that arouses curiosity because it is unexplained, inexplicable, or secret. What writer doesn't want the reader's curiosity piqued? There is nothing quite like a deep, dark secret to keep a reader turning pages. Okay, so now you know what your book is about. You got your outline, you got your main characters, and you know them inside and out. You've even come up with a subplot or 2. You know the physical location where you're going to write and how much time you're going to allot to writing. What's missing? Nothing really. You're ready to start. And where do you start? You start with the first paragraph. And one reason to have a good opening paragraph is because people browsing in a bookstore or reading a sample chapter online usually decide to buy a novel based on a very few things. If you are not known to the potential book buyer, it works like this. First, the book buyer is attracted by the cover, then by the back cover blurb, and that usually contains a combination of excerpts or quotes and reviews. Finally, if they're still interested, they'll open the book, the first page, and read the first paragraph. Another reason for new authors to work on a compelling opening paragraph is because editors will be reading your work for the first time. Because editors are overwhelmed with submissions, your first impression is very important. When I edited Mystery Magazine, I could tell whether or not I would read the rest of the story after I finished the first paragraph. It told me a lot about the writer's quality, the quality of the writing, and his or her ability to get me quickly into the story. I'll give you about 30 seconds here. Here's 3 examples of opening paragraphs from some of my books. Okay, pacing. Most novels have some type of resolution at the end of the book. Usually it involves the resolution of the primary objective, the A plot. But all subplots have to be resolved as well. The main plot and each subplot have a beginning, middle, and end. For example, if the A plot is about a family trying to save the farm, by the end of the book, either the farm is saved or it's lost. In the beginning of the book, the reader starts following the progress of accomplishing this objective. During the course of the story, there is an ebb and flow. The protagonist gains ground, then loses ground. He moves forward and is thwarted until there is a resolution at the end of the book. Using your outline, you can see the various scenes that move this plot along, one way or the other. If you look at your outline and you see that you've gone 50 pages without a scene that moves your A plot forward, this is a red flag. And you can tell it's from your outline. So make adjustments so that there's not such a long lapse in between movements forward of your plot. The reader will get bored or irritated when information regarding the main plot does not flow smoothly and frequently. And the same is true of the various subplots. The American Heritage Dictionary defines denouement as the outcome or solution of the plot of a play or a novel, the untying. When you untangle plot webs, don't forget to tie up the loose ends. There's a famous story about Raymond Chandler regarding tying up loose ends. I've heard at least 3 different versions of it, actually. During the filming of The Big Sleep, it seems that the cast and some of the crew were puzzled about the unexplained murder of one of the minor characters early in the story, even though it didn't affect the outcome of the story. They just wanted to know who did it. Supposedly, a telegram was sent to Chandler asking the author to fill them in. He supposedly fired back a telegram that read, "Damned if I know." Well, maybe Raymond Chandler can get away with it, but you and I can't. The best advice on how to develop an ear for dialogue is simple, and that's listen to people talk. When I talked to Robert Ludlum once, he was telling me he used to be, before he became a writer, he and his wife were part of a theater company in New York, and to make extra money, he used to work the bar next door to the theater. And the theater had lots of people from longshoremen to theater goers, tough guys to tuxedo guys, and just a wide mix of people and dialects. And he said he used to just listen and listen and listen and listen. And so that's one of the reasons that dialogue was one of the best parts of Ludlum's books, because he did listen and he paid attention. It's really important not to have all your characters speak the same way, using the same speech patterns. Longshoremen don't sound like Harvard professors, although they are often easier to understand. When you write your character bio, take a moment to listen to your characters talk. It is often helpful to base a character's speech patterns and colloquialisms on a person or persons whose manner of speech you know well. I do this a lot. When I find somebody who speaks with a particular speech pattern, I kind of keep track of that in my head, and I often use it in a book. I give it to a character. So I do a composite. I'll do the voice of this person, and I'll do the body structure of this person. So I have this kind of character in my head that is an amalgam of a number of characters. Let's say you have a character questions a remark of another character. Depending on who he or she is, you might say, "Come on, man, don't give me that shit," or "I beg your pardon," or "Give me a break," or "Give me a hit off of whatever you're smoking. I haven't been that high since college." Or a timid character might say, "I'm not sure now, but I think you're mistaken. I could be wrong, but I don't know. Forget it." Again, it all comes down to knowing your characters. And so listen to people talk and start collecting speech mannerisms and dialects. Without discipline, you will never complete a novel. No matter how good the story is, no matter how compelling the characters are, no matter how clever your opening paragraph is, a novel cannot be completed without discipline. I liken writing a novel to running a marathon. A person can run around the block without much preparation or training, but running a marathon requires discipline and hard work. You can't just get up off the couch one day after years of being a couch potato and run 26 miles. The novel is the marathon of writing. No other form of writing comes close. Not a poem, a song, or even a screenplay. I've done all of them. And even after I'd done them all, I still didn't think I could ever write a novel. And like training for a marathon, you will change and become stronger as you make your way from page 100 to page 500. You will not be the same writer at page 500 that you were when you wrote the first sentence. You'll be better. And hope will turn into confidence because you know that you can do it. Thing I used to do I did a lot of spec scripts when I was writing movies, and I did. So what I did is if you say that you want to show it to your friends will usually say, if you don't meet the deadline, they say, that's fine, just take your time till you get it right. That isn't what you want, because if somebody tells me they want a script in 2 weeks, I'll get it to them in 2 weeks. If they tell me they want it in 2 months, it will be 2 months. 6 months, it'll be 6 months. If they say that, do it whenever I feel it's ready, they may never see it. So what I did to get around that is if I were finishing a script and I knew the person I wanted to give it to, I would set a meeting with them at a time when I felt that I could reasonably have it done. And I used that as a deadline because when I got there and I had the meeting set and and when that time came, I couldn't call and I couldn't be a flake. I would burn a connection. So I made sure that I was done on time, and it always worked 100% of the time. Okay, writer's block. Writer's block is something that writers talk about, but most professional writers don't have it. Professional writers can't afford it. In a way, it's like someone walking onto the docks, asking someone on the docks if he's got longshoreman's block. If he continues with longshoreman's block, he's soon going to have unemployed guy's block. When I've gotten writer's block in the past, it wasn't really writer's block at all. Usually it was one of three causes. Besides not getting paid for a spec script, sometimes that gets in the way. That becomes writer's block. But besides that, usually it boiled down to one or more of these three basic issues. Number one, the outline wasn't fleshed out. For example, you might put down the most basic information about a scene, but you don't really know what you plan to accomplish with that scene or why it's really there. So when you get to it, you don't know what to write. And there's an exercise in the book called an outline within an outline. So if I'm stuck on a scene, if I'm really rolling till I get to one scene, I'll do an outline within an outline, which means that I would have know the purpose of the scene, why it's there. I would know what each character who's in the scene, why they're there, what they want out of it, how it moves the story along, the transition into it and the transition out of it. So it's kind of like a little outline within an outline. And if I can fill that in, usually that scene starts to write itself. The second thing sometimes that cause writer's block is that you really don't know your characters well enough. If you really knew what your scene was about and you really knew your characters, they would tell you what they wanted to do with that scene, and the scene would unfold easily. The remedy, if you don't know your characters well enough, is to look at the characters who are in that scene and go back to fleshing out the bio. Just because you write the bio in the very beginning doesn't mean that you can't go back and flesh it out. You can't go back and flesh out your bio even more. That's what I've done. A lot of times I'll start with maybe a page, and then I'll get to a scene and I'll realize that I don't really know that much about this character when it comes to this particular aspect of his life. And so I'll go back and I'll start fleshing out that part of the bio. The third thing is you really don't have much of a story. Sometimes you haven't worked your story out well enough so that you really don't, so you really know the A plot or your subplot, They must be compelling and interesting to you. If they're not going to be interesting to your readers. And the remedy is to review the material on plots and subplots and make sure your main plot and subplot are really fleshed out and they're really interesting to you. Now, this is my favorite exercise. Over the years, I'll occasionally hit a point in the story where I'm not sure what direction I'm headed. And usually this involves a key scene, often the climax. And I recall reaching a climactic scene in one of my serial killer novels. And I wasn't really sure how the confrontation should go between the protagonist and the antagonist. And I thought about the scene for several days and I couldn't come up with anything. So I decided to put on the appropriate music, which in this case turned out to be Hell's Bells by AC/DC. I put on the earphones and played that song over and over for about 20 minutes. And because I knew my characters well from my character bios, I let the characters go at each other in a way that was true to their natures. I just watched the movie in my head as the AC/DC movie soundtrack continued to play, and it worked. The scene came together fantastically. Now, there's a word of warning here. You must know your characters before you do this exercise. If you don't, your characters might dance to the music, but their actions may not ring true to your plot. I've done this exercise dozens of times over the years, and it always works as long as I know my characters. This is critical. There's something I call the artistic DNA. It took me 1 million published words to develop my own style. And what is style? It's the way it's not the way your way with grammar, although that can be an aspect of it. It's not plot, although you can be known for some good plots, and therefore it can be an aspect of your style. What I mean by style essentially is the way you write. For example, Faulkner wrote sentences that some people started reading in the late 60s and have yet to finish, while Hemingway wrote novels existing of lots of short sentences. Simply writing a long sentence does not guarantee a good novel any more than simply writing short sentences guarantees one. No reader would ever confuse Faulkner and Hemingway's styles, but they know that their styles are different and they can tell them apart easily. My style evolved over a long period of time and was built on my previous writing. For example, I used to write a lot of poetry, and I occasionally still do. I wrote a couple of hundred songs with the lyrics and the music, and I wrote metaphysical observations and stories. All this previous writing experience helped me develop a cadence and a rhythm that I believe is unique to me as my fingerprint. It's my artistic DNA. Sometimes people ask me about what I use to convert my books to ebooks. I use Legend Maker. There's a guy named Michael Zapp. I highly recommend Legend Maker. It's a very inexpensive program. It's about $29. And Michael gets back to you within, on email customer support. He gets back to you very quickly within usually a couple hours, no more than 24. I've also used a program called Juto. You can use it for converting regular ebooks, but I also use it for creating fixed layout picture books. So anybody who's doing something like that, like picture books for kids, what I mean by that is the words are actually embedded in the picture itself. Those don't flow with the normal ebook conversion program. So it's a little more complicated. And again, Juto, the guy who created that program, he emails me back easily within an hour or two. He's in Great Britain, so you basically got to get a lot of your questions into him before they go to bed in England. So, but he's great. He's both of these guys, Michael Zapp at Legend Maker, and the gentleman at Juto, really a great customer support. I highly recommend both programs. KDP, Kindle Direct Publishing, they have conversion programs available for authors. They even have a new one for comic books, if anybody's into graphic novels or comic books. And they also have a program now, which I have not used, which I plan to use the next time I create a fixed layout book from KDP for InDesign. And there are new programs that come out every week. Use Google to find them. For example, if you want to find a fixed layout program to convert your books, just put in Google, convert fixed layout picture book. Probably Judo will come up, but that would get you started in the right direction. And if you don't want to go through the trouble yourself, there are a lot of conversion services out there that do it, and people with IBMG, the group I'm with, do ebook conversion as well for very, very reasonable prices. Now I'm going to try to play something here to give you an idea of embedded media, which I would like to talk about a little bit. My screen's going to go a little funny here, but we'll see if this works. Work with me here. Okay.
This video demonstrates the full capabilities of the Cathedral of the Senses ebook running on an iPad. We also provide 3 additional formats for the Kindle, other ebook readers that support the EPUB format, and finally a good old paperback option. All 4 options are available for purchase at cathedralofthesenses.com website.
We're not going to play the whole thing.
However, that only the iPad
it's something I want to show you in here.
Multimedia experience that we will now demonstrate. Stephen Smoke's Cathedral of the Senses is a revolutionary new media-enhanced reading experience that allows readers to immerse themselves in an additional dimension intended by the author. What this means is that at key points in the story, the reader can choose to play appropriate verses from songs written by the author by merely touching the screen. Singing live in a world where nothing counts. You just think, it's alright, baby. It's alright now. This was something that was literally impossible to experience until now. The 11 songs written by Stephen Smoke for this book were recorded by young musicians, many from Arizona, whose styles include blues,
so you get the idea. And this is really something that is obviously of interest to me, being a musician myself and hanging out with a lot of musicians. Being able to embed music into a book is really fantastic. You'll notice it's not an audio book. The reader has the option to play the music whenever he or she wants to, or not play it at all. And it also has the ability to, you also have the ability to download the song when you're done from iTunes. All the music individually and as an album you can download from iTunes. Now, people often ask me about book trailers. Here's a book trailer for my latest book, a children's book I did with Bernadette Shee, and Dan Wheeler did the music to this. Let's see if this works. Managing children's expectations in difficult financial times can be challenging. But this touching story about a father's love, the power of personal responsibility, and the magic of sharing is a good place to start. One day in early summer while at the carnival with his friends, Ping Ping spends all his money. Even though he has a wonderful time, a part of him feels bad because his father had given him money to last the entire summer. When Ping Ping returns home, his father says, "When I gave you the money for the summer, I told you it was your choice how you spend it." When Ping Ping's friends hear about their friend's money problems, they suggest that if Ping Ping's father really loved him, he would give him more money. The rest of the story is about how taking personal responsibility, plus a little hard work, can provide more choices in your life, even if it doesn't always seem like it at the time. At its core, Ping Ping Panda, The Power of Personal Responsibility, is a story of a father's love and how it sometimes can be misunderstood. The book is available at Amazon in hardcover, softcover, and ebook formats. For more information, go to www.cathedralofthesenses.com. panda@responsibility.com, or email us at panda@responsibility.com. Managing children's expectation. As I said, Dan Wheeler did the music for that, and it really helped create the mood. A lot of people do ask me about book trailers, and so that's definitely a sample of one. And okay, and so now you've seen how to embed media in a book, and this really, to me, is a very exciting time in publishing, because let's say, for example, you've written a book about the new economy. And so you might not want to put music in a book, but you might want to put a video in a book. So at the end of one chapter, you actually you convince the reader that you're an expert. You got them excited about your program, and then you, in the book, you put a 30-second video, and they play that, and they're even more excited. And right next to that, as that video ends, right next to the video is a buy button to download your seminar, which might be $50 or $100 or whatever it is. That reader will never be more interested and motivated to buy your product than they will be at that moment. As a matter of fact, 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, I wrote a book. I wrote an article that was widely syndicated called "The Book is the Store." And this basically talked about this idea where now with the ebook becoming more ubiquitous and people wanting digital products, suddenly the book becomes your store. If you have a $2.99 book, you might end up selling a $100 product. So your book literally becomes a store. And in the old days, at the back of a book, you would see a list of books by the author you could buy. Nowadays, you get to the back of the book, you can actually download the author's next book or any of his books that you want to, and you start reading in about, in less than a minute. It's an entirely different world out there, and the applications for that are really just limited by your imagination. Anybody who's interested in buying this book, this webinar is based on, just send me an email and I'll shoot you over a $2 discount code that you can use to get it for $2 off. And I'm also creating actually a self-directed version of this course with 15 modules based on the original course, and it will be available at the end of July. Let me know if you want me to keep you posted about that. And you can email me if you're interested in a free 30-minute consultation about your next book project. Because I'm with IBMG, even if I can't do it, we have so many people who are involved in editing, book design, and marketing. So many different facets, from the concept to putting together the outline for the book, to putting together the marketing plan, to tweeting and integrating all of your Facebook and social media. So let me know if you would like to talk to me about that. All right, so now we can open this up to some questions and answers. Let's see. So if you want to type in an answer, type in a question, I will do my best to answer that question. Anybody have any questions? Okay. Okay, how much time do you devote to research for a novel? Well, it all depends. If I'm writing about something in Los Angeles, almost none. I remember I wrote a book when I wrote. Well, it all depends. It all depends. The set, I wouldn't do much research on the setting if it were in Palos Verdes or Los Angeles. I was doing a book called The Atlantean Document, and I set it in Bimini. And I'd never been to Bimini. It's just off of Florida. And so I actually went to the library and spent a lot of time looking at picture books about Bimini. And I chose several houses in the pictures and I pictured my characters in those houses, and I used the descriptions of the outside and the inside of some of those houses, so it was almost as though my characters were alive in Bimini in my head. An interesting thing about that book is that it was kind of a metaphysical book. It had to do with Atlantis, and it turns out that after I wrote the book, they found a crystal where, because this was a book about, the premise of it was that it was a crystal that had been left at the time of Atlantis, and it was broken into 3 pieces, and if you put it all together and shined a laser through it, it became an owner's manual for the planet. So anyhow, one of the crystals, in my book, one of the crystals was found in Bimini, and it turned out after I finished the book, I found that there was a dive there, and they did find a crystal, and they attributed it to Atlantis, and it was found in very similar circumstances in terms of the description that I talked about in the book, the underwater description. So that was kind of interesting. Okay, marketing ideas. Let's see. There's quite a few questions now. Let me start. Okay, let me. Yes, I'll send you a copy for a book review, Joanna. Marianne, marketing seems overwhelming and expensive for someone self-publishing. Where do you start? That is literally another seminar. And I talked a little bit about it last night, and I'm working with Dan Wheeler. We're doing basically 4 or 5 hours of social marketing every day. The truth is there's really no easy way around it. You're either going to have to pay somebody to do it, or you're just going to have to spend a lot of time doing it. Because you're going to be able to go out to, you can get 10,000 followers and friends and pay very little money for them, but it isn't going to get you anywhere. I had a friend of mine who literally did that. He got, in one day, he got 5,000 friends and followers. And I called him and I said, "That's very impressive, man." And I said, "How many books have you sold?" And he said, "0." Because none of the people were interested. So when I work and when Dan and I work these lists, you have to make sure that the people that you're getting to follow you are people who actually have interest in your subject, in your type of writing, and so it requires. For me, I have some criteria. Like I'll take a look and I'll find out if these people have tweeted for Twitter. I'll find out if they've tweeted within the past couple of days. I usually go to people with 2,000 or less followers so they can see me. I also read their bio to see if they're somebody who really might be interested in what I'm doing, and then you can engage with that person. For example, when I saw in a bio that this one writer had written a series or a book called Columbus Homicide, and I wondered if that meant Columbus, Ohio. And sure enough, he was from Ohio. And I was born in Columbus, Ohio, so I can engage with him. I did engage with him, and you can do that directly. And those kinds of people, you can develop relationships. You can engage with people. When you go on LinkedIn, for example, you go on and you solve problems for people, like with fixed layout that I was talking about for children's books. I went on a LinkedIn group and I found that they were being given incorrect information by another member, indicating that a legend maker could handle fixed layout books. And I knew that wasn't true because I'd asked Michael about it, the programmer who created Legend Maker. I found out that wasn't true. So I was able to solve a problem for those people in the group, and so I established some credibility with those people. And so they were much more willing to follow me, much more likely to pay attention if I was telling them that I was doing something, because I had actually solved a problem for them. I was engaging, and so once you engage, then there's an art to converting that trusted conversation into sales. It is the short answer is there's no real easy way around it. My best advice would be to find somebody you trust, who can demonstrate, who can show you a track record or some results, and have them get you started. Because no matter how much they do for you, you're still going to have to originate the content of the social marketing. Even if they change it in the way they disseminate it, you're the expert on your subject. So you're going to have to engage with people one way or the other, even if you hire somebody. Okay. I'm just reading I'm reading one of these questions. Yes, don't you think that if you are passionate about your writing, that you are somehow led to the information you need? I have amazing experiences for my epic novels. That was Brenda George. And yeah, I totally agree. I've had all kinds of amazing experiences. Actually, when I write, one of the reasons I like to write metaphysical novels is because there is, no matter how many people are inspired by them, no one is more inspired by them than me. I learn about myself. I try my very best to be honest and in my writing, and I want to learn I want to learn as much as the reader does. Okay, I'm reading. Oh, okay. Okay. Here's somebody who says, my publisher is suggesting a marketing tech for between $6,000 and $12,000, but I feel he's trying to sell me on the technician. So I've asked him to send me a proposal. I wouldn't know if the proposal would work or not. Contact me offline, Marianne. I would be able to tell you a little bit about that. I could at least give you the questions to ask, because it's something that I'm doing pretty much all day long, and with other people, and I can tell you the appropriate questions to ask. Okay, that's really about it. I would like to thank all the people at IBMG who helped me put this together. Dan is one of them, Beth Wittenberry, Vicki. It's a nice group of people, and if you haven't joined IBMG, you might think about doing it, because these people are very willing to share and not put you on the clock. We're all pretty much all writers, and we like the idea of going up the learning curve together. Anyhow, okay, well, thank you all very, very much. And that's it. Good night.